Throughout history, there have been multiple kings who refer to themselves as the King of Kings. But the Bible clearly states whomever is the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah is God himself. Yet still, when Haile Selassie was crowned King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, the Tewahedo Church of Ethiopia did not acknowledge him as God, even though the Bible clearly says he is. That's why God had to deny being God. Why? Because there's millions of people within his own kingdom believing that God is someone named Jesus, his grandson, because it goes from Jacob, who is God, to Joseph, to Jesus. In other words, the Greek kingdom infiltrated Ethiopia prior to his coronation, and they were part of every emperor being crowned since around the 17th century, because that's when they really, Renaissance was happening. They tried to change everything, and they know the source of everything was Ethiopia. Hence, the Greek kingdom created churches within Ethiopia prior to the coronation. So let's read. God of gods, for his mercy endureth forever. Lord of lords, for his mercy endureth forever. To him that smote Egypt. Why? Because Egypt infiltrated his kingdom prior to his coronation. Don't you notice when Haile Selassie was born in the year of John in 1892, here comes the Greek kingdom with Rome invading Ethiopia in 1896. Then it came again. In other words, they know who's the King of Kings. Let's watch.
But there is no problem as opposition to the state or opposition to me. Since his restoration in 1941, the Lion of Judah has carried out a program of modernization and of political and social reform, and has begun to westernize the 2,000-year-old Coptic Christian.
In other words, his nation became a Coptic Christian nation. In other words, they became a Greco-Egyptian nation, worshiping the wrong God. So who is the real God?
He became emperor on November 2nd, 1930, and was crowned Haile Selassie I, King of Kings, King of Zion, conquering lion of the seed of Judah, power of the Trinity.
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So let's watch when Orthodox originated. The origin and history of Orthodox. It began in the 15th century. It was in reference to Greek churches. Said in the 1640s in reference to Greek churches. Hence, the Greco-Roman churches. So beginning the 12th century, the Patriarch of Alexandria, whom had the very first pope, appointed the Ethiopian archbishop, known as the Abuna. In other words, our father. And remember, God says he doesn't like man saying that he's our father. So right there, you should know that, yo, what are they doing in Ethiopia? What they're doing, they're adding in Hebrew and Greek within their Bibles. Remember, the oldest Bible was written in Ge'ez, oldest, most complete Bible. That's why Haile Selassie had to revise it. In 1962, a new Amharic translation from Ge'ez was printed again with the patronage of the emperor. In other words, he didn't like the 81-book Bible that the Tewahedo Church was using because it was infiltrated with Hebrew and Greek. So realizing that there ought to be a revision from the original Hebrew and Greek of the existing translation of the Tewahedo Bible. In other words, they kept adding in stuff. So that's why it says, to reach our avowed goal, we must remove any detrimental traditions and obstacles in our way. Haile Selassie. He also said, we must look first to the Almighty God, who has raised man above the animals and endowed him with intelligence and reason. We must put our faith in him that he will not desert us or permit us to destroy humanity, which he created in his own image. In other words, God comes first. Part 1.